The fifth day of the tournament started with terrible news for the human delegation. Lieutenant Yoon, who was their last hope, had broken her leg during training practice. She was trying to move faster to compete with Velen's speed when she slipped and fell down a flight of stairs. The medical team said she would need months to heal. Ambassador Ji Woo sat in his office staring at withdrawal papers that would end Earth participation in the tournament. His hands shook as he prepared to sign the documents that would announce to the galaxy that humans were officially giving up. It was the most shameful moment of his diplomatic career. Outside his office, the alien media was already making jokes about human weakness. The Galactic news service ran a story titled, "Fragile Humans Break Before Fighting Even Begins." The Velen Entertainment Network showed comedy videos of humans falling down and getting hurt. The Nexari information system simply ignored human news completely, as if they were not worth mentioning. Commander Hyun Ki walked through the station hallways, feeling the stares and whispers of alien beings who had watched his species fail again and again. Some aliens laughed openly, while others just shook their heads with what looked like pity. The human section of the station felt like a funeral home where everyone was mourning their dead hopes. But deep in the maintenance levels, Jin Ho was reading tournament rules on his work tablet during his lunch break. He had been studying these rules for years and knew every single regulation by heart. Most people never bothered to read past the first page, but Jin Ho had memorized every detail. Tournament Rule 847 stated that any registered citizen of a competing world could enter the tournament as long as they were properly documented and passed basic health requirements. Rule 851 said that substitute fighters could be added to replace injured team members up until the final day of competition. Rule 923 explained that emergency substitutions required only the approval of the official delegation leader. Jin Ho closed his tablet and walked slowly through the station, thinking about what he had learned. He passed the human quarters where defeated fighters sat, with their heads in their hands. He walked by the medical bay where Lieutenant Yoon was lying in bed with her leg in a cast. He stopped outside Ambassador Ji Woo's office and took a deep breath. The ambassador looked up in surprise when Jin Ho knocked on his door. In 15 years of working on Station Prime, the quiet janitor had never spoken to any of the important humans. He had always stayed invisible, doing his job and keeping out of everyone's way. But now Jin Ho stood in the doorway holding his work tablet. Ambassador Ji Woo, "I am Jin Ho, the maintenance worker," Jin Ho said in a quiet voice. "I have been studying the tournament rules, and I believe Earth still has one option available to avoid withdrawal." The ambassador stared at him with confusion, wondering why a janitor would care about tournament rules. Jin Ho showed his tablet to the ambassador and pointed to the relevant regulations. "Any human citizen can compete if properly registered." He explained, "I am a citizen of Earth, and I am already documented as living on Station Prime. I could be registered as an emergency substitute fighter." The ambassador almost laughed at the ridiculous suggestion. A janitor fighting against galactic champions who had trained their entire lives. It would be suicide and would make humanity look even more foolish than they already did. But something in Jin Ho's calm manner made him pause and listen. Jin Ho pulled up video files on his tablet, showing tournament matches from the past week. He had recorded everything and analyzed it frame by frame. "Look at this match between the Galactic champion and the Therian warrior," he said, pointing to specific moments. "The Galactic flexes his shoulder muscles exactly 2.3 seconds before every major attack." He showed another video. "This is the Velen champion against the Krex fighter. Notice how she coils her body in the same pattern before every high-speed movement. It takes 0.7 seconds and she always coils to her right side first. The pattern never changes." Ambassador Ji Woo leaned forward to look more closely at the videos. He had watched these same matches, but had never noticed these details. The Nexari champion requires 4.1 seconds of perfect concentration. Before firing his strongest energy beams, Jin Ho continued. Any distraction during that time causes the beam to lose accuracy by up to 30%. The ambassador stared at Jin Ho with growing amazement. This quiet janitor had discovered patterns that their professional coaches and analysts had completely missed. He had found weaknesses in fighters that everyone else considered unbeatable. How had a maintenance worker learned so much about combat? I have worked on this station for 15 years. Jin Ho explained, I clean every training area, fix equipment in every practice room, and maintain the security systems that record everything. I have watched thousands of fights and studied every technique. I see patterns that others miss because they focus on strength instead of strategy. Ambassador Ji Woo looked at the withdrawal papers on his desk, then back at Jin Ho. The situation was desperate and they had nothing left to lose. If Jin Ho fought and lost quickly, it would be no worse than what had already happened to their other fighters. But if there was even a tiny chance that this man had found something important, then maybe it was worth the risk. The ambassador made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He activated his communication device and called the tournament officials. I wish to register an emergency substitute fighter for the Earth delegation, he announced. The entire human section of the station buzzed with confusion when they heard the news tournament. Officials arrived within an hour to process the paperwork. They looked skeptical when they saw that Jin Ho was a maintenance worker with no formal combat training. But the rules were clear and his registration was valid. They had no choice but to accept his entry. News of the janitor fighter spread through Station Prime like wildfire. Aliens gathered around viewing screens to see footage of the human who would fight in the semifinals. The Galactic champion Brutok specifically requested to face Jin Ho, claiming he wanted an easy victory before the final round. The alien crowds roared with laughter when they saw Jin Ho's simple work clothes and cleaning equipment. They made bets on how quickly he would be defeated, with most estimates ranging from 10 to 30 seconds. The human was clearly insane to think he could survive against beings who could tear apart metal with their bare hands. But in his secret training room that night, Jin Ho was not preparing to survive. He was preparing to win. He had spent years learning every weakness of every species, and now he finally had a chance to prove that intelligence could defeat strength. He practiced movements that no alien had ever seen, because they were based on human techniques that had been forgotten by most of the galaxy. The tournament announcer made the official announcement. Tomorrow, the Galactic champion Brutok will face the human substitute, Jin Ho, in what promises to be the shortest match in tournament history. The crowd cheered with anticipation, while Jin Ho quietly cleaned his equipment and prepared for the fight of his life. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one nobody takes seriously. The massive space station called Station Prime floated in the darkness between three bright stars. The station was bigger than most cities, with countless levels that stretched up and down like a metal mountain, spinning slowly in space. Every 50 years, this station became the center of the galaxy when warriors from hundreds of worlds came to fight in the greatest tournament ever created. Commander Hyun Ki stood at the window of the human waiting area, watching alien ships arrive one after another. Each ship brought fighters who looked like nightmares or dreams depending on how you saw them. The Galactic ships were huge and black, like flying mountains. The Velen vessels moved like silver snakes through space. The Nexari craft glowed with rainbow colors that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Hyun-Ki felt his stomach twist with worry. He had been to 3 of these tournaments before, and each time humanity had lost badly. The other aliens were simply too strong, too fast, or too deadly. Earth always sent their best soldiers, but their best was never good enough against beings who could tear through steel with their bare hands or move faster than bullets. Down in the lower levels of the station, far below where the important people gathered, Jin Ho pushed his cleaning cart through the empty hallways. He had worked here for 15 years, keeping the station clean and running properly. Most people never noticed janitors, but Jin Ho preferred it that way. He could go anywhere, fix anything, and nobody asked questions. The tournament opening ceremony began with great noise and bright lights. The main arena could hold 50,000 beings and every seat was full. Aliens of every shape and size cheered as their champions walked onto the fighting platform. Some fighters were so tall they had to bend down to fit through doorways. Others were so wide they needed special ramps to enter the arena. The tournament master was a being called Overlord Vex, who looked like a giant spider made of metal and crystal. His voice boomed through speakers in every language at once. Welcome, beings of the galaxy, to the 500th Galactic Combat Championships. Here, the strongest, fastest, and deadliest warriors will prove who rules. The Stars Commander Hyun Ki watched from the human section, which was much smaller than the areas given to other species. There were only 12 humans on the entire station compared to hundreds of aliens. The crowd barely noticed when Earth champion Captain Min Soo walked onto the platform. He was a good soldier who had trained his whole life, but he looked tiny next to his opponent. The Gorak warrior Brutok was 9 feet tall with arms like tree trunks and fists that could punch through metal walls. His skin was gray like stone, and his eyes glowed red like burning coals. When he roared, the whole arena shook. The crowd loved him because everyone knew Goraks were born to fight, and this one had never lost a battle. The match began and lasted exactly 43 seconds. Brutok grabbed Min Soo like he was a small child and threw him out of the ring so hard that the human captain hit the wall and did not get up. The medical team rushed to help him while the crowd cheered for Brutok, who raised his massive fists in victory. Meanwhile, Jin Ho was cleaning the medical area where defeated fighters were brought for treatment. He had watched the match on a small screen while mopping floors. Nobody paid attention to the quiet janitor. As he worked, he had seen this same scene many times before. Humans came to fight and left on stretchers. The next Earth fighter was Lieutenant Da Yun, who was smaller but faster than Min Soo. She fought a Velen warrior named Sisk, who moved like lightning, striking again and again so quickly that most eyes could not follow her movements. Da Yun tried to block the attacks, but it was like trying to stop rain with your bare hands. The fight lasted 2 minutes before Da Yun was knocked unconscious. Ambassador Ji Woo sat in his office writing reports back to Earth about another humiliating defeat. He had to explain to the government why they kept sending humans to these tournaments when the results were always the same. Maybe it was time to accept that humans were simply not meant to be warriors in a galaxy full of monsters. In his report, he wrote, "The Gorak species evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived. They can lift 10 times what a human can lift, and their bones are like steel bars. The Velen species are descended from creatures that hunted in packs using speed to catch prey that was faster than anything on Earth. The Nexari are living crystals that can focus energy into deadly beams that can cut through any armor. But down in the maintenance tunnels, Jin Ho was learning things that no ambassador or commander knew. He had access to every part of the station, including areas where aliens thought they were alone. He had seen Gorak warriors when they thought nobody was watching and noticed they always flexed their shoulder muscles before throwing a punch. It was like a warning sign that anyone could read if they knew what to look for. When Jin Ho cleaned the Velen training rooms, he noticed something interesting. They had to coil their bodies like springs before they could move at super speed. This took a tiny amount of time, maybe half a second, but it was always the same motion. It was like they were machines that had to wind up before they could work. The Nexari were the most dangerous fighters because they could shoot energy beams from any part of their crystal bodies. But Jin Ho had noticed something while cleaning their meditation chambers. They needed perfect concentration to focus their energy. If anything distracted them even for a moment, their beams would miss their target or lose power. Night after night, while the station slept, Jin Ho would go to an abandoned storage room where he had set up a small training area, using broken equipment that he had repaired. Nobody knew about this place, and nobody would think to look for a janitor there. He practiced basic human fighting techniques that he had learned from old movies and books. Jin-Ho was not trying to become stronger or faster than the aliens because he knew that was impossible. Instead, he was learning how to be smarter. He studied every video of every fight from every tournament going back decades. He looked for patterns and weaknesses that the professional coaches had missed. The tournament continued and more human fighters were defeated. Earth had sent 8 champions and 6 were already eliminated. The remaining 2 fighters looked scared as they watched aliens who could tear apart metal with their bare hands. The crowd was starting to ignore the human matches completely because they were always so one-sided. But Jin-Ho kept watching and learning. He saw that Gorak warriors became tired quickly because their massive muscles used too much energy. He noticed that Velen fighters had trouble changing direction once they started moving at high speed. He observed that Nexari warriors could not use their energy beams and move at the same time. As he cleaned up after each day of fighting, Jin-Ho began to understand something that nobody else seemed to know. The alien fighters were incredibly powerful, but they all had weaknesses. The problem was that human fighters tried to match strength with strength and speed with speed instead of using their brains to find better ways to win. The tournament was almost over and humanity was facing complete failure once again. But in the quiet storage room deep in the station, a janitor was preparing for something that nobody could imagine. He had a plan that was so simple and so crazy that it might actually work. The third day of the tournament began with even more violence than before. The alien crowds were getting excited because the weak species were being eliminated, and only the true warriors remained. Jin-Ho pushed his cleaning cart through the medical bay, where 3 different species of fighters were being treated for broken bones and worse injuries. Dr. Kim, the human medical officer, shook her head as she worked on another defeated Earth fighter. "This is madness," she said to her assistant. "These humans are being torn apart like paper. We should never have come here." Jin-Ho quietly mopped the floor around the medical beds, listening to every word but saying nothing. The Gorak training area was Jin-Ho's next stop, and he made sure to arrive during their practice session. The massive gray-skinned warriors were hitting training dummies that were made of solid metal. Each punch left dents that would have crushed a human skull. Jin-Ho pretended to clean windows while watching their every movement. Brutok, the champion, was teaching younger Gorak fighters how to throw their devastating punches. He demonstrated the technique slowly so they could learn. First, you flex your shoulder muscles like this, then you twist your body and drive forward with all your weight. The younger warriors copied his movements, exactly making the same shoulder flex before every attack. Jin-Ho made mental notes as he worked. The shoulder flex always happened 2 seconds before the punch. It was like a countdown that anyone could read if they were watching for it. The Gorak fighters were incredibly strong, but they were also predictable. They had trained the same way for thousands of years and never learned to hide their intentions. Later that day, Jin-Ho was assigned to fix broken lights in the Velen practice area. These snake-like aliens moved so fast that they seemed to disappear and reappear in different places. But Jin-Ho had learned to watch their movements in slow motion by studying security camera footage. During his night shifts, the Velen champion Sisk Ra was showing her students how to achieve maximum speed. She coiled her long body into a tight spring shape, then released all that stored energy at once to shoot forward like a bullet. But Jin-Ho noticed something the coaches had missed. Before every high-speed movement, the Velens had to stop completely to coil up. It was like watching a bow and arrow. Jin-Ho thought, the arrow flies incredibly fast, but first someone has to pull back the bowstring. That pulling back motion was the weakness. Every Velen fighter had to telegraph their super-speed attacks by coiling up first. If someone could read that signal, they would know exactly when and where the attack was coming. The Nexari meditation chamber was Jin-Ho's most dangerous assignment because these crystal beings could kill with a thought. Their energy beams could cut through anything, and they never seemed to miss their targets. But Jin-Ho had a secret advantage that nobody knew about. He had been studying them for 15 years. The Nexari champion Chris was meditating with perfect stillness, his crystal body glowing with stored energy. Other Nexari warriors sat around him trying to copy his focus. Jinho worked quietly in the shadows, watching how they prepared their deadly attacks. The energy beams required complete mental concentration. Jinho realized the Nexari had to empty their minds of all thoughts, except the target they wanted to destroy. If anything broke that concentration even for a split second, the beam would lose power or miss completely. They were like living laser pointers that needed perfect aim. That night, Jinho went to his secret training room in the abandoned storage bay. He had built this place over many years, using discarded equipment that other people had thrown away. Old training mats covered the floor. Broken punching bags hung from the ceiling. Weights made from scrap metal sat in one corner. Jinho did not try to punch harder than a Gorak, or move faster than a Velen, or shoot energy beams like a Nexari. Instead, he practiced something completely different. He worked on timing and positioning and using an opponent's strength against them. He studied old human martial arts that focused on technique instead of power. He practiced stepping aside at exactly the right moment to avoid attacks. He learned how to redirect force instead of trying to stop it. He discovered pressure points that could disable even the strongest opponents, if hit correctly. These were techniques that human warriors had developed thousands of years ago when they faced larger and stronger enemies. The tournament continued, and Earth lost 2 more fighters. Lieutenant J1 lasted 30 seconds against a Velen warrior who moved too fast for human eyes to follow. Sergeant Bo Ram was defeated by a Nexari who cut through his armor with a single energy beam. The human delegation was becoming desperate and embarrassed. Ambassador Ji Woo held a meeting with the remaining human fighters and coaches. "We have 4 fighters left," he said, "but none of them have any chance of winning. Maybe we should withdraw from the tournament and save ourselves further humiliation." The room fell silent because everyone knew he was right, but Jinho was not ready to give up. He spent his breaks studying video recordings of every match. He analyzed the movements of winning fighters and losing ones. He looked for patterns that nobody else had noticed. He was like a detective solving a mystery that had been hidden in plain sight for centuries. The alien fighters were incredibly powerful, but they were also creatures of habit. The Gorak always flexed their shoulders before punching. The Velen always coiled up. Before moving at high speed, the Nexari always needed perfect concentration to aim their energy beams. These habits made them predictable to anyone who knew what to look for. Jinho began to understand why humans always lost. They tried to fight aliens, using alien methods. Instead of using human advantages like creativity and adaptability, they focused on building bigger muscles and faster reflexes. But humans would never be able to outmuscle a Gorak, or outrun a Velen, or out-energy a Nexari. The key was not to become like the aliens, but to become more human. Jinho realized humans were weak compared to galactic standards, but they were also flexible and clever. They could think of new solutions to old problems. They could use tools and techniques that aliens had never seen before. On the 4th night of the tournament, Jinho made a decision that would change everything. He began preparing for something that nobody would expect. He gathered simple tools from his janitor supplies and practiced techniques that no alien warrior had ever faced. He was getting ready to prove that sometimes the weakest person in the room could also be the most dangerous. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had been fighting the wrong way all along. The arena fell completely silent as Jinho walked onto the fighting platform, wearing simple gray work clothes and carrying nothing but a small towel. He looked impossibly tiny compared to the massive space around him. The platform was designed for giants, and he seemed like a child who had wandered into the wrong place. 50,000 alien beings stared down from the stands, and their voices created a sound like thunder when they saw the human janitor. Some laughed so hard they fell out of their seats. Others pointed and made jokes in languages that hurt human ears to hear. The betting screens showed odds of 1,000 to 1 against Jin Ho surviving more than 60 seconds. Across the platform, Brutok stood like a mountain of gray stone. His massive fists were bigger than Jin Ho's entire head, and his arms were thicker than tree trunks. The Gorak champion had never lost a fight and had never even been knocked down. He cracked his knuckles, and the sound echoed through the arena, like breaking rocks. Ambassador Ji Woo watched from the human section, feeling sick to his stomach. He had made a terrible mistake allowing this to happen. A gentle janitor was about to be murdered in front of the entire galaxy, and it would be his fault. Commander Hyun-ki closed his eyes because he could not bear to watch another human being destroyed. The tournament referee was a floating metal sphere that spoke in electronic tones. "The rules are simple," he announced. "The fight continues until one competitor surrenders, leaves the platform, or is unable to continue. Killing is not permitted, but serious injury is expected." The referee moved to the edge of the platform and waited. Brutok roared a challenge that shook dust from the ceiling and made several aliens in the front rows cover their ears. The sound was like an earthquake and a volcano erupting at the same time. It was meant to terrify opponents before the fight even began. Most fighters would be paralyzed with fear by that terrible sound, but Jin Ho stood quietly in the center of the platform, showing no emotion at all. He was watching Brutok, shoulder muscles and counting seconds in his head. 2.3 seconds he remembered from his studies. The shoulder flex always comes 2.3 seconds before the attack. The fight began with a signal that most beings could not hear because it was too high-pitched for normal ears. But Jin Ho was ready. He had been watching Brutok for 5 full minutes and had already seen the shoulder flex begin. The massive Gorak was already committed to his first attack. Brutok charged forward with a punch that could have shattered concrete walls. His fist moved like a cannonball toward Jin Ho's head with enough force to kill 12 humans. The crowd held its breath waiting for the inevitable splatter of blood and the quick end to this ridiculous match. But Jin Ho was no longer there. At the exact moment before impact, he stepped to his left, using a movement so simple that children learn it in playground games. The massive fist whistled past his ear, missing by less than an inch. Brutok stumbled forward off balance because he had expected to hit something solid. The crowd gasped in surprise as the mighty Gorak warrior staggered and almost fell down. Jin Ho used this moment to strike pressure points along Brutok's extended arm, using techniques he had learned from ancient human martial arts books. The strikes looked gentle, like someone tapping to get attention, but they hit nerve clusters that even Gorak anatomy could not protect. Brutok howled in pain as his right arm went numb and useless. He swung his left fist in a wild haymaker that could have taken Jin Ho's head clean off, but again the human was somewhere else, moving with perfect timing to avoid the attack while striking more pressure points on the exposed limb. The alien crowd had stopped laughing and started paying attention. They had expected to see a human being crushed in seconds, but instead, they were watching something they had never seen before. A tiny being was making the mighty Brutok look clumsy and slow. Commander Hyun-ki opened his eyes and stared in amazement. The janitor was not just surviving, he was actually winning Ambassador. Ji Wo leaned forward in his seat as he realized that Jin Ho had been telling the truth about finding alien weaknesses. This was not luck or accident, but pure skill. Brutok became desperate and began throwing punches as fast as he could, hoping to hit the elusive human through sheer volume of attacks. But every swing was telegraphed by the same shoulder flex, and Jin Ho read each one like words on a page. He flowed around the attacks like water around stones. The Gorak champion was breathing heavily now because his massive muscles consumed enormous amounts of energy. His punches were becoming slower and less accurate, while Jin Ho moved with the same calm precision he had shown at the beginning. The human was fighting smart, while the alien was fighting angry. After 10 minutes of missing every attack, Brutok was exhausted, and both his arms were numb from pressure point strikes. He tried one final desperate charge, hoping to tackle Jin-Ho to the ground, where his superior weight would matter. But Jin-Ho was ready for this too. As Brutok lunged forward, Jin-Ho dropped to one knee and struck a pressure point behind the Gorak knee that he had studied in anatomy files. The massive warrior legs buckled and he crashed to the platform. Like a falling building. The impact shook the entire arena and sent vibrations through the metal structure. Brutok tried to get up, but his legs would not obey him. The pressure point strikes had temporarily paralyzed his nervous system. He lay on, the platform gasping for air, while Jin-Ho stood calmly nearby, holding his small towel. The referee counted to 10 and declared Jin-Ho the winner. The arena erupted in the strangest sound anyone had ever heard. 50,000 alien beings sat in complete silence, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. A human janitor had defeated the Gorak champion using nothing but timing and technique. It seemed impossible, but they had all seen it happen. The human section exploded with cheers as Ambassador Ji Wuo and Commander Hyun-Ki jumped up and down like children. Dr. Kim ran onto the platform to check if Jin-Ho was injured, but he seemed completely unharmed. He had not even worked up a sweat during the fight. The alien media went crazy trying to explain what had happened. Sports commentators who had been making jokes about human weakness suddenly found themselves analyzing pressure point techniques and timing strategies. News reports flew across the galaxy, carrying word of the impossible. Upset? But Jin-Ho just walked quietly off the platform the same way he walked through the station maintenance tunnels. He had a job to finish, and tomorrow he would face an even more dangerous opponent. The Velen speed champion was waiting, and she would not make the same mistakes as Brutok. The galaxy had just learned that humans could be much more dangerous than anyone had imagined. News of Jin-Ho victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every major news network was showing footage of the impossible fight, where a human janitor had defeated the mighty Gorak champion alien species that had never heard of Earth. Were suddenly asking questions about human fighting techniques. The Velen delegation was not laughing anymore. Their champion Sisk Ra had watched the fight recordings dozens of times, trying to understand how Brutok had been defeated. She was faster than any Gorak and smarter too, but something about Jin-Ho's calm precision worried her more than she wanted to admit. Coach Tae Young from the human team tried to approach Jin-Ho with advice and strategy, but the quiet janitor politely declined help. "I have my own method of preparation," he said in his soft voice. "Thank you for the offer, but I must do this my own way." The coach looked confused, but nodded and walked away. That night, Jin-Ho went to his secret training room and began preparing for a completely different type of opponent. The Velen were not strong like the Gorak, but they were incredibly fast. Some could move so quickly that they seemed to teleport from one place to another. Their attacks came like lightning strikes. Jin-Ho had studied every Velen fight for the past 15 years and had discovered their greatest weakness. They had to coil their snake-like bodies before they could achieve maximum speed. This coiling process took exactly 0.7 seconds, and they always started by coiling to the right side first. It was like watching a spring being compressed before it released. Jin-Ho thought to himself, "The spring has to be pulled back before it can shoot forward." That pulling back motion was when Velen fighters were most vulnerable because they could not change direction or stop once they had committed to the coiling process. The next morning, alien reporters crowded around the human section trying to get interviews with the janitor who had shocked the galaxy. But Jin-Ho was nowhere to be found. He was deep in the maintenance tunnels doing his regular work and avoiding all the attention that made him uncomfortable. The arena was packed even fuller than the day before, because word had spread that something special was happening. Beings who had never cared about the tournament were buying tickets at incredible prices just to see if the human could do it again. The betting odds were still against Jin-Ho, but not by as much as before Sisk. Ra entered the arena moving with liquid grace that made her look like she was dancing instead of walking. Her scales shimmered in the bright lights and her eyes were like green jewels. She was beautiful and deadly, and she had never lost a fight in her entire life. The crowd cheered for her because Velen were popular fighters who put on exciting shows with their incredible speed, but there was also nervous energy in the air because everyone remembered what had happened to Brutok. Nobody was completely confident about predicting this fight. Jin Ho walked onto the platform wearing the same simple work clothes as before. He carried a small spray bottle that he used for cleaning windows and a cloth that he used for polishing surfaces. The alien crowd murmured with confusion. Wondering why he had brought cleaning supplies to a fight, Sisk Ra looked at the tiny human with something like respect in her reptilian eyes. She had studied his fight against Brutok and recognized true skill. When she saw it, this would not be an easy victory like everyone expected. "You surprised everyone yesterday," she said in perfect human language. "Today will be different." Jin Ho bowed politely and replied, "I hope you fight well. You are a great champion, and I am honored to face you." The simple courtesy seemed to surprise Sisk Ra, who was used to opponents trying to intimidate her with threats and boasts. The referee gave the signal to begin, and Sisk Ra immediately began coiling her body to the right. Just as Jin Ho had predicted, she was preparing for her famous opening attack, a lightning-fast strike that had defeated hundreds of opponents over the years. But Jin Ho was already moving before she completed her coil. He sprayed a fine mist from his cleaning bottle, creating a cloud of water droplets in the air between them. When Sisk Ra launched her attack at incredible speed, she hit the water mist, and her vision was scattered by thousands of tiny droplets. The attack that should have been perfectly aimed instead missed Jin Ho by several feet because Sisk Ra could not see her target clearly through the water spray. She shot past him like a bullet and crashed into the arena wall with a sound like breaking glass. The crowd gasped as the speed champion picked herself up looking dazed and confused. She had never missed an attack before and could not understand what had gone wrong. Jin Ho stood calmly in the center of the platform holding his spray bottle and watching her with patient eyes. Sisk Ra tried again, coiling her body for another high-speed strike, but this time Jin Ho was ready with his polishing cloth. He threw it into the air just as she launched forward and the lightweight fabric wrapped around her head, blocking her vision completely. Unable to see where she was going, Sisk Ra slammed into another wall even harder than before. The impact left a crack in the metal surface, and she lay still for several seconds while the crowd watched in stunned silence. Nobody had ever seen a Velen fighter look so helpless. The speed champion rose slowly, her scales now dull with pain and exhaustion. She tried to circle around Jin Ho, looking for an angle of attack that would not be blocked by his simple tricks. But the human seemed to know exactly where she would move before she moved there. Every time Sisk Ra began to coil her body, Jin Ho was already reacting to counter her attack. He used his spray bottle to create vision-blocking mist, or threw his cloth to tangle her movements, or simply stepped aside at the perfect moment to avoid her strikes. After 20 minutes of fighting, Sisk Ra had not landed a single hit, while Jin Ho had struck her with precise pressure point attacks whenever she came close. The proud champion was exhausted, frustrated, and completely outmatched by techniques she had never seen before. Finally, Sisk Ra made a desperate all-out attack, using every bit of speed she had left. She coiled her body tighter than ever before and launched herself like a living missile directly at Jin Ho's center of mass. This attack was so fast that most eyes could not follow it, but Jin Ho had been waiting for this moment. He dropped his spray bottle and cloth and stood perfectly still as the Velen champion shot toward him like a green and silver blur. At the last possible instant, he stepped aside and grabbed her extended arm, using her own momentum to redirect her into the platform. Sisk Ra hit the metal surface so hard that the impact left a dent shaped like her body. She tried to get up, but her nervous system had been scrambled by the crash and she could barely move. Jin-Ho knelt beside her and gently helped her sit up, showing the same respect he had given her at the beginning. The referee counted to 10 and declared Jin-Ho the winner. But this time the crowd did not erupt in noise. They sat in absolute silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. A human had defeated two galactic champions using nothing but simple tools and perfect timing. The alien media went into overdrive trying to explain how such things were possible. Scientists and combat experts were called in to analyze Jin-Ho techniques, while philosophers debated what this meant for the future of galactic combat. But Jin-Ho just walked quietly off the platform, ready to return to his maintenance duties. He had one more fight to go, and it would be against the most dangerous opponent of all. The Nexari champion could kill with a thought, and had never been defeated. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humans might be the most dangerous species of all. The entire galaxy held its breath as the final day of the tournament arrived. Every being with access to communication networks was watching because something impossible was happening. A human janitor had reached the championship match, and nobody could explain how. The Nexari delegation sat in their crystal chambers, discussing strategies in voices that sounded like singing wind chimes. Their champion Chris had won the last 3 tournaments and had never even been seriously challenged. He could fire energy beams that cut through any material, and his aim was perfect. Ambassador Ji Woo could barely contain his excitement as he prepared his reports back to Earth. For the first time in galactic history, a human would fight for the ultimate championship. The entire human species was watching and hoping for a miracle that seemed too good to be true. Down in the maintenance levels, Jin-Ho was doing his regular work as if nothing special was happening. He cleaned floors, fixed broken equipment, and maintained the systems that kept Station Prime running properly. Other workers stared at him with amazement, but he ignored all the attention. The arena was packed beyond capacity, with beings standing in aisles and hanging from railings to get a view of the historic match. Tickets were being sold for prices that could buy small spaceships. Security forces struggled to control crowds that had grown larger than anyone expected. Chris entered the arena first, and his crystal body threw rainbow patterns of light across the walls. He was beautiful and terrible at the same time, like a living jewel that could kill with a thought. His energy beams could cut through starship armor, and he had used them to defeat every challenger for 50 years. The crowd cheered with nervous energy, because everyone knew this would be the real test. The Gorak champion had been strong, and the Velen champion had been fast, but the Nexari champion was deadly beyond imagination. There were no weaknesses that anyone had ever discovered. Jin-Ho walked onto the platform carrying his complete janitor tool belt, which included spray bottles, cleaning cloths, scrub brushes, and various maintenance equipment. The alien crowd murmured with confusion, wondering how cleaning supplies could possibly help against energy beams that could cut through anything. The two fighters faced each other across the platform, and Chris spoke directly into Jin-Ho's mind using telepathic abilities that all Nexari possessed. "You have surprised everyone, little human," he said in a voice like crystal bells. "But raw energy cannot be countered by clever footwork." Jin-Ho smiled quietly and replied out loud so the entire arena could hear, "You are right. Energy cannot be countered, but it can be redirected." The simple statement sent ripples of confusion through the crowd because nobody understood what the human meant. The referee gave the signal to begin, and Chris immediately began gathering energy for his first attack. His crystal body glowed brighter as he focused power into a beam that could have melted steel. The process took exactly 4.1 seconds, just as Jin-Ho had calculated from years of observation. But the human was ready with something that nobody expected from his tool belt. He pulled out a small mirror that he had polished to perfect clarity using techniques he had learned from 15 years of maintenance work. The mirror surface was so clean it could reflect light without any distortion. Chris fired his energy beam with confident precision, expecting to end the fight with a single shot. The beam was bright enough to hurt alien eyes and hot enough to melt metal. It shot across the platform like a bolt of lightning aimed directly at Jin-Ho's chest. The exact moment before impact, Jin-Ho held up his mirror at precisely the right angle to catch the energy beam and reflect it back toward its source. The redirected beam struck Chris in his left arm, causing him to stumble and lose concentration. The crowd gasped in shock as they realized what had happened. The human had turned the Nexari's most powerful weapon against itself. Chris stared at his damaged arm with disbelief, because nobody had ever found a way to counter his energy attacks. But Jin-Ho was not finished. He pulled more tools from his belt, including a spray bottle filled with cleaning fluid. When Chris tried to fire another beam, Jin-Ho created a fine mist in the air that scattered and weakened the energy, making it harmless. The Nexari champion began firing multiple beams from different parts of his body, trying to overwhelm the human defenses, but Jin-Ho had studied every possible angle and was ready with mirrors positioned to redirect each attack back at its source. The battle continued with Jin-Ho using simple human tools to counter advanced alien technology. A rubber glove insulated him from electrical attacks. An absorbent mop soaked up excess energy that would have burned him. A piece of polished metal reflected beams back with perfect accuracy. Chris was becoming desperate because none of his attacks were working. The human seemed to have an answer for everything. He tried firing from multiple angles at once, but Jin-Ho moved between his mirrors like he was conducting an orchestra, directing energy beams wherever he wanted them to go. After 30 minutes of fighting, the mighty Nexari champion was exhausted from generating so much energy, while Jin-Ho looked as calm and fresh as when the match began. The crowd watched in amazement as their most powerful warrior was being defeated by a janitor with cleaning supplies. Chris made one final desperate attack, gathering every bit of energy he had left into a massive beam that lit up the entire arena. This attack was powerful enough to destroy the platform itself, and everyone knew it would either kill Jin-Ho or leave him as the winner. But Jin-Ho had been waiting for this moment. He arranged all his mirrors in a complex pattern that would reflect the beam multiple times before sending it back at Chris. The energy bounced from mirror to mirror like light in a funhouse before returning to its source with doubled power. The returning beams struck Chris with such force that his crystal body cracked, and he fell to the platform, unable to continue fighting. The referee counted to 10, while 50,000 alien beings sat in absolute silence, unable to believe what they had witnessed. Jin-Ho walked over to help Chris sit up, just as he had done. With his previous opponents, he showed the same respect and courtesy to the defeated champion that he showed to everyone he met. The simple gesture impressed the crowd more than all his fighting skills. The tournament officials declared Jin-Ho the winner and new Galactic combat champion, but he looked uncomfortable with all the attention. He tried to leave the platform quietly, but thousands of reporters and officials surrounded him, demanding interviews and explanations for the first time. In Galactic history, a human had won the greatest tournament in known space. The victory sent shockwaves through every civilization, as beings realized they had completely underestimated Earth and its people. Ambassador Ji Woo stood in his office, holding a communication device that was ringing with calls from governments across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know more about human fighting techniques and whether Earth was planning to become a major military power. But Jin-Ho just wanted to return to his maintenance duties. He had proven his point, and now he was ready to go back to the quiet life he preferred. The galaxy would never be the same, but he was still the same gentle janitor who fixed things and kept Station Prime running smoothly. The tournament was over, but the legend of the human who defeated Galactic champions with cleaning supplies would be told for generations to come. The galaxy had learned that true strength comes not from natural gifts, but from the courage to keep learning and the wisdom to turn disadvantages into advantages. Jin-Ho stood in the center of the arena, still holding his mop, as billions of beings across the galaxy learned a new respect for humanity. He had not just won a tournament, he had proven that intelligence and determination could overcome any obstacle. The Janitor had become the champion, and the universe would never underestimate humans again.